Right, okay. Click this.
Oh, here's Janice. Janice is just joining, and Dave, presumably. Let's wait for them.
Okay. Right, good evening everyone, and welcome to another CAS webinar. Tonight we have space news from Roy Bryce, then our main speaker for this evening is Katrin Raynor-Evans, whose presentation is entitled Exploring Astronomy and Space through Philately. Our next webinar is on the 8th of November, and I've still to arrange a speaker for that night. So I've contacted Mary McIntyre to see if she'd be available to give us a talk. Now, and I'd like to welcome our newest member, William, onto the society. Right, now it's over to Roy for space news.
So, Amanda, just the usual couple of seconds while I get things running.
Right, now, if everybody mutes themselves.
Can you see that okay? Okay. So, as usual, I've tried to find stuff that's quite current and up to date rather than too much stuff that you might already know about. So we'll see how we get on. So the outer ice giant planets, Neptune and Uranus, have plenty of mysteries. One of the biggest is where exactly they got the magnetic fields. They're incredibly strong, with Neptune's being 27 times more powerful than Earth's, while Uranus's varies between 2 and 4 times Earth's strength. Chaos rules in these electromagnetic environments, making them exceptionally hard to both understand and model. Now a team of researchers, led by Dr. Vitaly Prokopенko of the University of Chicago, thinks they might have found the underlying cause of both the field's strength and its randomness, and they're calling it hot ice. In chemistry, ice comes in many different forms. That doesn't mean different shapes like a cube or a ball, but different crystalline lattice structures that fundamentally alter some of its chemical properties. Regular ice uses a hydrogen bond between the oxygen and hydrogen in water to hold itself together. However, at extremely high temperatures and pressures, these crystal lattices can form in such a way that the hydrogen atoms in the water can move freely through the lattice. Since hydrogen atoms are charged, this is the equivalent of transferring an electrical charge throughout the lattice structure. In other words, if created in the right conditions, ice can actually be electrically conductive. Known as superionic ice, this unique form of ice has been the focus of research for decades, with conflicting results regarding how to achieve the structure. Dr. Prokopенko and his team used the Advanced Photon Source's high-energy synchrotron X-ray beam at the Argonne National Laboratory to probe the details of the formation process. What they found required thousands of runs on the system over more than 10 years. The data eventually pointed to 2 different conditions that could result in 2 different types of superionic ice. One of these sets of conditions happens to be similar to conditions in the internal atmospheres of the ice giant. Scientists have long thought that fluid layers at relatively shallow depths in their atmospheres cause the ice giant's unique magnetic fields. Simulations bore out this theory, but the idea of superionic ice could upend it, although more research is needed before this theory can be proven. Here's a quick video just telling us a wee bit more about Neptune's magnetic field.
Earth isn't the only blue planet in the solar system, but the other one is a very different world. When the Voyager 2 probe sailed past Big Blue Neptune in 1989, it found a ringed, stormy ice giant 17 times more massive than Earth. Neptune's magnetic poles are separated from its geographic poles by almost a quarter of the big planet. And its weirdly uneven magnetic field takes on this crazy, creepy crawly shape as streams of charged particles from the sun encounter the rapidly spinning huge world. Researchers at London's Imperial College combined Voyager's dataset with plasma and atmosphere observations to model Neptune's magnetosphere. The best way to understand it as no new missions to that most distant major planet are planned. No, Neptune isn't much like Earth, but by studying Neptune's energetic spider of a magnetic field, astrophysicists can better understand how to protect electronics and power grids from geomagnetic storms caused by our dynamic star, the Sun. For Space.com, I'm Dave Brody, and if you have questions, tweet me at DavidSkyBrody.
Change the subject here, going back to the moon. According to the most widely accepted theories, the moon formed about 4.5 billion years ago, after a Mars-sized object called Theia collided with the Earth. After the resulting debris accreted to create the Earth-Moon system, the moon spent many eons cooling down. This meant that a few billion years ago, legs of lava were flowing across the surface of the moon, which eventually hardened to form the vast dark patches, lunar maria, that are still there today. Thanks to the samples of lunar rock brought back to Earth by China's Chang'e 5 mission, scientists are learning more about how the moon formed and evolved. According to a recent study led by the Chinese Academy of Geological Sciences, an international team examined these samples to investigate when volcanism on the moon ended. The results are not only filling in the gaps of the moon's geological history, but also that of the other bodies in the solar system. The study, which recently appeared in the journal Science, was led by Zhi Xiaoxie of the CGAS Institute of Geography. He was joined by researchers from the Planetary Science Institute, Swedish Museum of Natural History, and several universities, including those in the US, UK, and Australia. The samples obtained by the Chang'e 5 rover are the first to be returned to Earth since the Apollo era, some 45 years ago. And they were obtained from the volcanic plain known as Oceanus Procellarum. That's the Latin for the ocean of storms. This lunar region is unique amongst lunar terrae, as it's believed to have hosted the most recent basaltic lava flows on the moon. Jim Head, a research professor in Brown's Department of Earth, Environmental and Planetary Sciences, was a co-author on the new study. The Chang'e 5 spacecraft landed on this region on December 1st, 2020, and managed to collect about 1.7 kilos of lunar rock from this region, including a core sample obtained from a depth about 1 meter beneath the surface. As Jim explained in a recent press release, these samples come from a region of the moon that's been largely unexplored by landed spacecraft. Previous samples from the Apollo missions and the Soviet lunar missions all come from the central and eastern part of the moon's near side. But it became clear as we collected more remote sensing data that the most recent volcanism on the moon was absolutely in that western portion. So that region became a prime target for sample collection. Specifically, the samples come from near Mons Rumker, a volcanic mound in the largest of the lunar maria, Oceanus Procellarum. The Oceanus Procellarum region is characterized by high concentrations of radioactive elements, such as potassium, uranium, and particularly thorium. These generate heat through long-lived radioactive decay and are believed to have played a role in prolonging magmatic activity on the near side of the moon. After examining the samples through radiometric dating, the team concluded they were on average about 2 billion years old. However, in these samples, we didn't actually see an elevated radioactive composition, Jim had said. If these radioactive elements are driving the volcanism in this region, we would expect to see enhanced radioactivity in the samples, but we didn't. Instead, the composition was similar to mare basalts from older deposits. So that cast some doubts on the hypothesis for long-lasting volcanism. Essentially, their examination revealed that alternative explanations are needed for why the Oceanus Procellarum region experienced a prolonged period of lunar magmatism. However, the most significant takeaway from this study is how it managed to constrain the age of some of the most recent basaltic lava flows from the moon. This not only establishes an endpoint for the moon's most recent activity, but also is critical to modelling its thermal evolution in geological history as well. As Head indicated, it also serves as a means for calibrating the timing of other events in the moon's geological history and on other bodies in the solar system. He said, when we look at the surface or a feature on the moon from which we don't have samples for radiometric dating, we try to estimate its age through the size, frequency distribution, and impact craters. Basically, as time goes by, larger impacts become more rare. So by counting craters of different sizes, we can establish a relative age of a surface. Last but not least, these examinations allow scientists to fill critical gaps in our understanding of the Moon's history. It added that between about 1 billion and 3 billion years ago, we don't really have many good data points to tell us what the impact flux looks like. So having an absolute radiometric date for this surface helps us to calibrate the flux curve, which helps us to date other surfaces on the Moon. And it's not only true for the Moon, it also helps us calibrate ages for Mars, Venus, and elsewhere. As I said, the samples obtained by the Chang'e 5 rover are the first we returned to Earth since the Apollo era. You might say that the results for this research are a preview of how our renewed lunar exploration efforts will yield new and valuable insights into how the Earth-Moon system formed and evolved. Jupiter's atmosphere has got plenty of distinct features, including lightning and the Great Red Spot. But the underlying processes that drive these features are less well understood, as the physics of the gases that make up Jupiter's atmosphere are complicated. A team of scientists from all over the globe has found a familiar process in all the chaos, though. They think a process that happens here on Earth might also be happening on a grander scale at Jupiter. The first hints at that process were visible when looking at one of the most common chemicals in Jupiter's atmosphere, ammonia. Ammonia is extremely common in Jupiter's atmosphere, but there's variations in its concentration levels that are hard to explain using traditional terrestrial weather modelling. To try to piece together what's causing these variations in ammonia, the research team turned to new data collected by the Juno probe. Juno has a tool known as the Jovian Infrared Auroral Mapper. It tracks auroral activity in Jupiter's upper atmosphere, including lightning. The data it provided pointed the research team to a better understanding of where the ammonia anomalies appeared. They then turned to another Juno instrument known as the microwave radiometer. This one specializes in seeing beneath the atmospheric layers of gas giants. It noticed that the upper layer of the atmosphere seemed to interact regularly with lower layers, causing a kind of vertical flow pattern that's seen on Earth as a form of what is known as a Ferrel cell. And here's the map of the Earth. A Ferrel cell is a type of wind pattern around Earth's meridians. On our planet, there are only 2 Ferrel cells, one in each hemisphere. They're sandwiched between the Hadley cells near the equator and the polar cells near each pole. Typically, their job is to spin counter to the other cells that would allow wind to interact in a sort of zigzag pattern throughout the hemisphere. Jupiter, on the other hand, has 8 of these patterns spread across each hemisphere. The wind patterns of these cells may be responsible for the colour bands in Jupiter, which run from east to west. They align with the expected boundaries of these analogue Ferrel cells. While there are some similarities to the Earth analogue, the flow pattern was different on Jupiter than on Earth. Despite its massive size, the gas giant lacks a stable surface layer to boundary the force of the wind. However, according to data from the microwave radiometer, it might have a stable layer a few kilometres down in the atmosphere that could act similarly to the gas flow pattern as it does here on Earth. If that is the case, Jupiter's atmosphere might be even more complex than we originally thought. Preliminary modelling suggests that something is acting as a drag on the air rotating in these circular patterns. It's not clear what that might be. The best way to figure it out is to simulate the overall process. The research team modelled the formative process of the ammonia anomalies and included factors such as gaseous diffusion and precipitation of the ammonia itself in the form of slush balls. Adding in something equivalent to extremely vertical Ferrel cells fits the model the best. All these discoveries wouldn't have been possible without data from Juno, which has been orbiting Jupiter and its moons for the past 5 years. But that doesn't mean Jupiter is the only planet to experience these kinds of atmospheric turbulences. The Sun might also be harbouring these types of complicated weather patterns. Scientists won't know until they look, but preliminary data to test the hypothesis could be in its way, with the Solar Orbiter and Parker both hoping to start collecting data soon. With luck, more of these types of discoveries await us on the biggest object in our own solar system. As a follow-on to my last space news, NASA's Lucy mission blasted off from Cape Canaveral last weekend, beginning its mission to explore a total of 8 asteroids, one in the main asteroid belt and the rest in Jupiter's 2 Trojan belts. All of these visits will take about 12 years to complete, including a flyby of the Earth. Jupiter's Trojans are like fossils from the early days of the solar system when the planets were forming. The objects in the Trojan region are surprisingly diverse. Some are like asteroids, while others have characteristics like Kuiper belt objects. Unfortunately, it turns out that Lucy spacecraft has got a problem. One of its solar arrays didn't latch properly. Even though the array didn't fully deploy, it generates enough power to operate the spacecraft normally. Despite this issue, NASA's mission team has decided to shift into cruise mode, and the spacecraft is now making its journey towards Jupiter's orbit. They're going to make another attempt next week to deploy the panel, and hopefully this time it'll work properly. And talking about possible problems if panels don't unfurl properly, the James Webb Telescope arrived safely at the European spaceport in French Guiana on October the 12th, continuing its long journey to the top of an Ariane 5 rocket. The observatory was brought into the clean room in the Guyanese Space Centre and unboxed by engineers to make sure it survived its journey unharmed. The giant cargo container carrying James Webb was raised vertically and then pulled away to reveal the telescope in its launch configuration. Once it's certified to be working, it'll be fitted inside its launch fairing and then attached to the top of the Ariane 5 upper stage booster. NASA is still targeting December the 18th for its launch. And then cross your fingers. Mission controllers had to suffer the 7 minutes of terror when NASA's Curiosity and Perseverance rovers lost contact during the dive through the atmosphere of Mars. Well, mission controllers managing the James Webb launch and deployment have a similar situation, except their terror is going to last for 30 days. Shortly after launch, the James Webb Space Telescope will begin the first of 40 major deployments, using hundreds of actuators to extend its sun shield and deploy its mirror. After the current problem with Lucy, it's going to be very grueling for everyone involved. And as always, thanks to the folk at Universe Today for giving me the newsletter that gives me the up-to-date information that I can steal and compile into the Space News presentation. That's the Space News for tonight, so it's back to Alice and Amanda.
Right, thank you for that, Roy. That was really interesting. Brilliant.
Oh.
Yep.
Yep.
Very interesting as usual. Right. Now it's on to our main speaker for this evening. Katrin is a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society and Royal Geographical Society. She's a member of the European Astronomical Society and Astrospace Stamp Society. She writes articles and interviews for popular astronomy magazines, including the BBC Sky at Night, Stanley Gibbons, and has a regular column on the All About Stamps website. She is co-authoring her first book, and recently Asteroid 446500 Katrin Raynor was named after her. So I would like us to thank Katrin in the usual manner.
Thank you. You haven't heard it yet. You might not you might not be applauding at the end.
I meant to say usual welcome. I'm all over the place tonight.
That's what we did.
Do you want me to share my screen now?
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
I've given you permissions to share it.
Okie dokie. So if you let me know if you can see that.
That's it. Yep, fine.
Fab. Let me just move you guys out of the way. And I'll stop my video. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining me this evening. As you know, my name is Katrin, and tonight I'm going to discuss what we can learn about astronomy through Philately. I'm going to show you some examples of what stamps exist globally, celebrating the subject of astronomy. And this is a perfect example of an astronomy themed stamp. It's one of my favorites, and it was issued by the United States Postal Service in 2017 to celebrate the total solar eclipse that was seen in the US. And that was the first total solar eclipse seen along a very narrow path across the US since 1918. And it's actually one stamp, but the design is made of thermochromic ink, which means that when heat is applied, the color changes. So you can see the stamp on the left there, the moon is obscuring the sun, and you can see the sun's corona, which is the outermost part of the sun's atmosphere. And when heat is applied to the stamp by pressing a thumb or finger on it, the full moon appears, which you can see there on the right. And this is actually a real photo of a total solar eclipse taken in Libya in 2006. And yeah, the world of stamp collecting, it's a science and an art in itself, and there are so many facets of the subject. And this is just a brief introduction. My talk is about an hour long. I could talk for a week, so I've just chosen some subjects that I hope will interest you all, get you excited, and give you a flavour of what it's all about. And yeah, I'm still recovering from COVID, so if I start coughing and spluttering, then I apologise.
Katrin, sorry to interrupt just for a second. You've actually switched your video off. It's up to you if that's how you want to do it. But,
Yeah, no, I prefer it with off.
okay,
That's okay. Okay. So my talk, just to give you an overview, I'll be talking about what's so great about stamps or philately. I'll give you a brief introduction to philately. Then I'm going to talk about the world's first astronomy stamps, and then the global spread of astronomy on stamps. Then I'm going to give you a few examples of astronomy stamps issued here in the UK. And then I'm going to talk about, what's the word? Like organizing an astronomy and philately collection into separate sections. Then one slide on the future of philately. And then if you're interested in collecting astronomy themed stamps, then there's just a slide at the end then on how to get started. Okay, so what's so great about philately? Well, it's a really unusual and creative way of learning about history, geography, science, culture, politics, animals and comic books, and of course, astronomy and space. There was literally a stamp for anything. So just to give you a few examples of some thematic stamps that are out there, we have a stamp issued in Egypt in 1986 that depicts hieroglyphs. And a set of 4 stamps were issued in the UK celebrating the British weather in 2001. So there's just one stamp there as an example. And there are even stamps with a dinosaur theme, and this is a really interesting branch of thematic philately called paleophilately. And we have a stamp here issued in Switzerland celebrating chemistry. Again, another really interesting thematic branch of philately called chemophilately. And we have 4 stamps there that were issued in 2019 in the US celebrating hip hop culture. So I found this quote on the internet, which I thought summed up the hobby really well. Stamp collecting is so much more than a hobby. It's a lifestyle and a community, and it is a lifestyle for me now. You know, I'm writing about it, I'm studying it in my free time, and the community that I'm part of online is brilliant. I've made some really fantastic connections. And thanks to social media such as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, even TikTok, the hobby is really enjoying a boom amongst younger people. So just to give you a few examples of the people that are on social media, on the bottom left there, we have a guy, he goes by the name of the Punk Philatelist, and he has a blog about stamps, and he believes that they are a vibrant expression of pop culture. This chap in the middle here, Graham Beck, he has his own YouTube channel called Exploring Stamps, and he's exploring the world one stamp at a time. Really, really informative videos. He makes some really top quality content. So if you're interested, then please go and look at his videos. And on the right there, we have Philately, a guy called John Simper. He's very active on social media, and he offers a monthly subscription on a website called Patreon, where you can subscribe to different tiers at a monthly cost, and he will send you stamps or first day covers or whatever every month. So yeah, it's a way to escape and unplug from the modern world, and for me it is a way to learn and to promote both disciplines, you know, astronomy and philately. So just to give you a brief introduction to philately, because some of you guys may not actually know what it is. Another great example here of some fantastic astronomy themed stamps that were issued this year, I think back in June, by the United States Postal Service. You can see there's 10 images that celebrate the science behind NASA's ongoing exploration of our nearest star, and the images display common events on the sun, such as solar flares, sunspots, and coronal loops. Okay, so what is philately? Well, the word philately is the English transliteration of the French philately. It's taken from the Greek root word feel or file, meaning an attraction or affinity to something, and italia, meaning exempt from duties and taxes, to form philately. And it's the study of postage stamps and postal history, but it also refers to the collection, appreciation, and research activities on stamps and other philatelic products. For example, we've got Cinderella stamps, poster stamps, mail that's been flown by aeroplanes, mail that's been transported by boats, and even mail that has been into space. So I mentioned Cinderella stamps just now. So these are virtually anything resembling a postage stamp, but they're not issued for postal purposes by a government postal administration. So for example, Scout Post stamps, they're a great example of a Cinderella stamp. So if you've ever had a Christmas card through your letterbox with a stamp on it, but it's been delivered by the Scout Post, then yeah, it hasn't actually been authorized by a government, like a government postal administration. So a great example here of some astronomy themed Cinderella stamps. They are the Solar System Rocket Service stamps, and they were issued by Broadway Approvals, who were based in Denmark Hill, London, and they advertised in boys' comics from 1955 to the 1970s. And you may notice that the perforations aren't perforations at all. They're actually just tiny ink dots. And philately involves more than just stamp collecting or the study of postage. It is possible to be a philatelist without owning any stamps. For instance, the stamps being studied may be very rare or reside only in museums. So here we have the 1 cent magenta. It's a very, very famous stamp. There's only one left in the world, and it last sold at auction back in June of this year for $8.3 million, and it was bought by Stanley Gibbons. Yeah, so when I found out that the 1 cent magenta was up for sale, I contacted Sotheby's in New York and asked them to send me a catalogue, which they did very kindly. And I was flicking through the catalogue and I came across this page. So it was very common for owners of the 1 cent magenta to mark the back of the stamp. So you can see there on the top right hand side, you can see the outline of a stiletto shoe on its side, and the initials SW. So that was Stuart Weitzman. He was the last person to own the stamp. He's the one that sold it, and he was a very famous shoe designer. So yeah, my eyes were drawn to the top row there. I was like, oh, there's a comet. How interesting. You know, it's astronomy related. So yeah, so the guy that had this stamp back in the 1940s was Frederick T. Small. He was an Australian stamp collector, an engineer. He was a tennis official, and an executive of the Celanese Corporation, which was a chemical company. And yeah, I've been trying to research into him, you know, wondering, well, why did he choose a comet themed marking or an astronomy themed marking? Thinking, well, he must have been an astronomer, but unfortunately I'm at a dead end now. I have no information as to why he chose that comet marking. But I think it's very interesting. I'm still trying to get to the bottom of it, but yeah, I just thought it was a really interesting kind of example of an unusual crossover between astronomy and philately. Okay, so the reasons for collecting, just very briefly. So a lot of people have their reasons for their own reasons for collecting stamps. Most people will start off collecting and sorting out stamps by country or theme. You can buy packs of stamps online to get you started, but I think people soon realize, you know, it's a hobby that can quickly get out of control, seem really overwhelming. But once you realize your main interest, you can focus on that. So some people will collect stamps just for the postage, the gum alone, and this can affect the value of the stamp, but it is also of interest to collectors. So stamps, for example, printed on the gum side by mistake are sought after by collectors with an interest in uncommon varieties. People will collect stamps for perforations. So that's the middle image. So as you all know, it's a way of separating the stamps. And for the stamp collector, perforations matter, not only as a way to distinguish different stamps, but also as part of the condition of stamps. And in rare circumstances, sometimes a stamp may have different perforations on opposite sides. And yeah, on the right hand side there, to you and I, that all those stamps, they all look the same color blue, but to the philatelist who is interested in the paper and the ink, these are actually all different variations of that blue color. So some people will just collect stamps for the paper that they're printed on, or the variations of the ink color. And of course, rarity and errors. So on the bottom left there is a stamp of the inverted Jenny, which was a 24-cent United States postage stamp. It was first issued in 1918, and it's probably the most famous error in American philately. only one pane of 100 of the invert stamps was ever found, making this error one of the most prized in all philately. And you can see there, sorry, I meant to mention that the image of the aeroplane is actually printed upside down. And yeah, I just wanted to draw your attention. This is a good astronomical error example. So in the middle there, we have the stamp that was issued in Czechoslovakia in 1967. And I've just zoomed in there and blown up the top right corner of the image on the bottom left. And the engraver of the stamp, he mixed up, or she mixed up, 2 letters of the alphabet so that the constellations Lepus and Lupus are actually transposed. And of course, the theme. A lot of people collect stamps for varying themes. And my theme of choice is astronomy and space. But it's not just about stamps. So you may remember when I explained what philately is, I mentioned other philatelic material. So it's not just the stamp that's of interest to collectors. Philatelists like to collect first day covers, which is a postage stamp on a postal card or a stamped envelope, franked on the first day the stamp is authorized for use. And the stamps are affixed to specially designed envelopes, often with the design of the theme that is being celebrated. So we have a lovely example here of an astronomy themed first day cover issued in Canada in 2018, celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. So the stamp on the left there is a photograph of the Milky Way, and on the right hand side, as you can see, it's a photograph of the Northern Lights. And this lovely cover here that was issued in 2002 in the UK, really beautiful example of a first day cover. You know, it's very colourful. You've got the solar system there, and these stamps were issued in 2002 to celebrate the subject of astronomy. And yeah, with the growing celebration of space and astronomy through philately, some covers made it beyond our atmosphere into space aboard shuttles or Apollo missions, and mail that has made it into space. This has its own branch of philately, so name, it's called astrophilately. And the Apollo 15 scandal, this is very famous. So unknown to NASA, the crew of Apollo 15, who were Al Worden, David R. Scott, and James B. Irwin, they agreed to carry 400 unauthorized postmark covers aboard the spacecraft and subsequently onto the surface of the moon. And upon the astronauts' return, the covers were postmarked again aboard the recovery ship, the Okinawa. And Hermann Seeger, the German stamp dealer involved in the plan, he sold some of the covers for prices in the thousands. And when the news of the flown covers reached NASA, the astronauts were reprimanded and forbidden to fly in space ever again. So if you ever see this cover at your local auction house, or you see it on eBay for a couple of quid, then buy it because it is worth an absolute fortune. And just quickly, just want to draw your attention to presentation packs. So these typically contain a full set of new stamp issues. So we have the astronomy issue here again that was issued in 2002. And it comprises a folded card containing detailed notes about the stamps and a card with clear strips for holding the stamps in place. And these are then all in turn held within a clear sleeve. So this example on the bottom left, you can learn all about Herschel's telescope, all the way through to Hubble's telescope. And when you fold the card out, you have this lovely star map here that you could take outside, and you can learn all about the constellations. So I think this is a really great example of learning from stamps without even opening a book or looking on the internet. So the hand stamps or cancellations alone are of interest to some collectors. And for astronomy philatelists, there are some wonderful hand stamps available. And these are simply ink stamps used to cancel the stamp so they can't be reused. And they come in a variety of shapes and sizes, pictures and ink color. And imaginative hand stamps are eye-catching, and they form a really important part of the cover. And the stamps on the covers can be cancelled with the usual first day of issue stamp at a post office, but often people will send the covers away to a special hand stamp centre to have the stamps cancelled with a special pictorial design which adds to the theme of the cover. And yeah, if your main interest is these hand stamps and cancellations, then this subject is called Markophily, and you are a Markophilist. So I just wanted to give you a few examples of some lovely astronomy themed hand stamps out there. So on the top right, we have a pictorial hand stamp that was produced for the space science issue in 2012. And on the bottom right there, we have a lovely postmark that was produced for the 50th anniversary of man on the moon. And I love that that they substituted the 0 for an astronaut's footprint. But not all postmarks are produced to correspond with the first day issue of a stamp. So for example, in the middle there, we have a brilliant cancellation commemorating Comet Bennett in 1970, and it's perihelion on the 20th of March, 1970. And on the left there, in November 2018, a postmark was produced to celebrate InSight, a robotic lander landing on Mars. So yeah, a good example there of where the stamp and the postmark don't actually have anything to do with them. So the guy who sent me this cover that you can see on the left-hand side, the post office in America at the time, they just produced a postmark to celebrate InSight. There was no stamp associated with it. So this guy just put any old stamp on an envelope and posted it off just to get that postmark. And a good example of a recent one in the UK would be Emma, I forgot her name now, is it Emma Raducanu? The lady who won the American, forgotten, the tennis championship in America. So the Royal Mail produced a postmark to celebrate her winning that event. Okay, and can you sign my cover, please? This is something that I say a lot. Autographs from eminent scientists and astronomers form a really special part of my collection. I have autographs ranging from Dr. Alan Chapman, for example, Ian Ridpath, and he is the chairman of the Astrospace Stamp Society. I have Jim Al-Khalili's autograph on a cover. And yes, some recent ones here. So in the middle, at the top, I got in touch with Pete Lawrence and Chris Lintop from The Sky at Night and asked them if they could sign a cover. So they very kindly sent me their addresses. I posted it off to them and they signed it and sent it back. And on the bottom there, Dame Jocelyn Bell Burnell. Again, I just emailed her. I said, this is what I'm doing. This is what I love. Can you please sign a cover? She gave me her address and yeah, she signed the cover for me. And on the bottom right here, we have a cover celebrating John Glenn, the first American in space. I'm not sure if this is an authentic handwritten signature. It could be an auto pen, and an auto pen is a device used for the automatic signing of a signature or autograph, and they're often used when celebrities or famous people get hundreds of letters each day. So, for example, when the Apollo missions, really got going, man landing on the moon, the astronauts were inundated with requests to sign covers, photographs, posters, anything, and obviously they couldn't keep up with that. So if you have any Apollo memorabilia in your collection, it may be that any of the signatures on that, it could be an auto pen. And there is a brilliant website out there called the Astronaut Auto Pen Guide, and it's a really good resource to check if any covers you have signed by astronauts are genuine or not. Okay, so it all comes together. So all of this is great, but what can these 4 pieces of philatelic information teach us about astronomy? So if you remember, I said it's about researching the stamps and the dates, and here is an example of all 4 elements of the cover coming together. So the stamps, the postmark, the signatures, and the cachet, which is the illustration on the left-hand side of the envelope. It can unravel a factual account about an astronomical event, such as the centenary of general relativity. So here we have the cover, we have the stamps, we've got signatures on there, and we've got the cachet, so the image there on the left-hand side. So each stamp showcases the work of Einstein and Hawking. So you've got Albert Einstein, Stephen Hawking, an image of gravitational waves, Hawking radiation, and then we've got 2 black holes colliding and a black hole. And the silver postmarks, they were used to cancel the stamps on the 1st of July 2016, the date the stamps were issued. And the cachet tells us what the stamps are celebrating, and also tells us that they were launched at Starmus 2016, which is an international festival focused on celebrating astronomy. And the cover has been signed by Professor Kip Thorne and Professor Bernard Schutz. And I met Kip Thorne back in October 2019 at a lecture at Cardiff University. He had just opened a new physics laboratory at the uni and he delivered a talk. And Bernard Schutz was there too. And I just recently interviewed him for the Royal Astronomical Society magazine, following his recent Eddington Medal Award for his work in gravitational waves. And so, yeah, I knew that I was going to this talk. I knew they were both going to be there. So I thought, right, great opportunity. I'm going to take a first day cover with me and get them to sign it. So I think, again, this is a really great example of what philately can teach someone about astronomy. So for example, if I passed this cover to someone who knew little about general relativity and cosmology, they could take this away and do hours of research looking at the details on the stamps. You know, they can search, well, who are these people? What is star mass? So yeah, fantastic example there of just bursting with information. I just wanted to focus on these stamps because I just think they're absolutely beautiful. So the images are printed on iridescent foil, which really makes them unique and eye-catching. And I had great fun researching these because my knowledge of cosmology isn't great. So it was really interesting to delve deep to find out what the words and diagrams meant. So top left there, we have Albert Einstein, you can see him, and his equation there of special relativity. And someone pointed out the other day that actually it's wrong because I think it should be a small m, not a capital M. Then we've got Stephen Hawking and his famous equation, the Birkenstein-Hawking equation. And on the right-hand side, we have the famous trousers diagram representing two black holes colliding. On the bottom left, a diagram of Hawking radiation. And this diagram is actually based on a blackboard sketch that was sent to the stamp illustrators from Cambridge University, which is where Stephen Hawking worked or was based. Then we have black hole, and on the right there, we have an image of gravitational waves. So hopefully you're all wondering what the first astronomy stamp was. Well, the first astronomy theme stamp dates to 1887, when Brazil issued a perforated stamp. It's buff and blue in colour and depicts Crux Australis, which is the Southern Cross, an asterism of the constellation Crux, seen in the Northern Hemisphere. And the asterism is astronomically accurate on the stamp, with acrux and gacrux pointing the way to the south celestial pole. And it's illustrated as if the observer were looking up to the sky from Earth. And here is the stamp. So stars are a really symbolic part of the Brazilian flag. They represent the constellations in the Southern Hemisphere and show how they were seen from Rio de Janeiro during the early hours of the morning on November 15th, 1889, the day the country shifted from an empire to a republic. So as you can see, the Southern Cross constellation is a really important part of their history and culture. So it's understandable that it would feature heavily on stamps. And as you will see over the next few slides, the Southern Cross was a favourite to print on Brazilian stamps for almost 10 years, with the colour and size of the stamp evolving over that time. I'll just have a quick drink. Okay, so the second astronomy stamp, that was also issued in Brazil. 3 years later, in 1890, Brazil issued a further series of perforated postage stamps featuring the Southern Cross, this time in a variety of colours and values, which you can see there on the top right. And the asterism featured for a second time in 1890, but this time on perforated newspaper stamps, which you can see there on the bottom left. And newspaper stamps are stamps that were used to pay for the cost of mailing newspapers or periodicals. And for this design, the asterism was illustrated shining above the Sugarloaf Mountain, Brazil's world famous landmark. I think you might be able to see my my mouse, but you can just see the asterism here in the middle of the circle, and the Sugarloaf Mountain there under the letter A. And these stamps were used again in 1898 when Brazil reissued the stamps as newspaper surcharge stamps, and they were overprinted with the year and stamp value. And the term surcharge in Philately describes any type of overprint that alters the price of a stamp. So surcharges may raise or lower the face value of existing stamps when prices have changed too quickly to produce an appropriate new issue, or just simply to use up surplus stock. So you can see there that the original stamps, if you like, have been overprinted with a new date and price. So a star appears. Venus, the morning star, appeared on a set of stamps issued in Brazil in 1894, and it's the first stamp featuring a planet. These stamps are known as Madrugada Republicana, the Republican dawn, and commemorate the beginning of the Republican period. And on the 15th of November, 1889, you may remember I mentioned this earlier, a group of military officers known as Republican Dawn overthrew Emperor Dom Pedro II, with the fall of the monarchy taking place around 8 AM that day. And research of astronomical charts has shown that Venus was visible in the morning sky at the time of the fall of the monarchy, affirming that the bright star on the stamp is undoubtedly Venus. So jumping ahead to the 20th of June 1930, the 4th Pan-American Congress of Architects was held in Rio de Janeiro. And to commemorate this event, 3 stamps were issued, including this 300 Reis stamp, I think that's how you pronounce it, illustrating the Southern Cross above the Sugarloaf, with the addition of 2 columns or architrave in the foreground. And if you compare this image to the previous stamps that have been issued, you will notice that the asterism is a mirror image of its true self. So the mirror image of the asterism on the 1930 stamp was perhaps illustrated as if the observer were looking down on the celestial sphere, as sailors and astronomers would have done when using an armillary sphere or an astrolabe for navigation. And if you are unfamiliar with an armillary sphere, then there's one here you can see featuring on a stamp issued in Nicaragua in 1985, celebrating the return of Halley's Comet. And after all, the Southern Cross is depicted in reverse on the flag, and an astrolabe features on the Empire of Brazil flag, again tying in with Brazil's nautical history. And I'm not sure why the illustration of the Southern Cross was changed at this particular time on the stamp. But again, something that I'm always looking out for. If someone knows the answer, please let me know. So the global spread of astronomy on stamps. So slowly other countries issued stamps with an astronomy theme. So we have a stamp here that was issued in Italy in 1930 that features flying boats and the Southern Cross. And this was issued to celebrate the transatlantic seaplane squadron flight from Rome to Rio de Janeiro. In 1941, Norway issued a stamp illustrating fishing boats and the aurora. And the 50th anniversary of the Mizusawa Latitude Observatory was commemorated on a stamp issued in Japan in 1949. And the Equatorial Line Monument marking the position of the equator featured on a stamp issued in Ecuador in 1949. And San Marino celebrated the International Year of Astronomy in 2009. Space exploration featured on a stamp issued in Poland in 1970. And the Hubble Space Telescope there featured on a stamp issued in America in 1981. So astronomy stamps in the UK. So why countries all over the world, from Colombia, Nigeria, Japan, Russia, they all celebrated astronomy and humankind's achievements in space. The UK did not start commemorating astronomy in space until much later. And in 1966, the Royal Mail issued a stamp depicting a radio telescope at Jodrell Bank. It's bright yellow in colour, as you can see. It cost 4 pennies, and the stamp was issued within a set of 4, with each image celebrating a different aspect of British technology. And then in 1970, the Royal Mail issued a stamp commemorating the 150th anniversary of the Royal Astronomical Society. It was issued within a set of 5 stamps celebrating anniversaries in the UK, pink in colour, and the stamp depicts William Herschel holding a sketch of Uranus, which he discovered in 1781. We've got Francis Baily there in the middle, and he, if you've ever seen an eclipse, Baily's beads were named after him, and these are an arc of bright spots seen during a total or annular eclipse. Then we've got John Herschel, who was William Herschel's son, and he's well known for naming 7 moons of Saturn. And on the right there, we have Herschel's 40-foot telescope, which was constructed in Slough between 1785 and 1789. So yeah, again, very small stamp, just a tiny piece of paper, but you can glean a lot of information from it. Like, you might think, well, who are these people? What is Herschel holding? What's the Royal Astronomical Society? And how do I build a 40-foot telescope? So I've just chosen 5 examples of astronomy stamps issued in the UK over recent years. So you've seen this one previously. In 2002, the Royal Mail issued a miniature sheet of stamps celebrating British astronomy. And whilst the pictures are very attractive, unfortunately, there seems to be a lack of connection to British astronomy and astronomers, because all the images here were taken using the Hubble Space Telescope. And in 1768, James Cook boarded the ship Endeavour in Plymouth, and he sailed to Tahiti. The trip took around 8 months, and the purpose of the trip was to view the transit of Venus with the aim to gather astronomical information to measure the solar system. And the Royal Mail issued a set of 6 stamps in August 2018 to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the voyage of James Cook and his companions. And James Cook and Charles Green made drawings during their observations of the transit, and these have been used here on the first class stamp called the Endeavour Voyage, and superimposed onto an image of the sun. And one of the most interesting details of the drawings is the black drop effect that they observed during the transit, which you can see here on the stamp. And the stamp is also illustrated with a sextant, which was used for navigation purposes during the voyage. And one of the Millennium projects commemorated on stamps was the National Space Centre at Leicester. The centre has a particularly distinctive space-age building. You might be wondering, well, where is it on the stamp? Well, unfortunately, it wasn't finished at the time the stamp was released in 2000, so it couldn't be illustrated. So instead, it's just the Millennium Project is just represented by a generic picture of the night sky. And in 1987, the Royal Mail issued 4 stamps marking the 300th anniversary of Isaac Newton's Principia. Despite the small size, the stamps are bursting with information about Newton's accomplishments. So the 34-pence stamp there on the bottom right portrays a satellite along with Newton's insights on projectile motion and orbits. And the 22-pence stamp above it, it honours his study of planetary motion through the depiction of 6 planets orbiting the sun, on top of which is an impressive coronal loop. And the 50th anniversary of Patrick Moore's BBC TV programme, The Sky at Night, was commemorated by a set of 6 colourful and attractive stamps released in 2007. The designs show, for example, the Cat's Eye Nebula, the Saturn Nebula, and the Helix Nebula, and superimposed on each image is an outline of the home constellation with the location of the object marked, and all objects are identified with a number beginning with the letter C, which is their reference in Patrick's own brand Caldwell catalogue, because his full surname was Caldwell Moore. And just a quickie, I found this out the other day. I thought it was very interesting. I was doing a bit of reading and I came across this paper called Adjusting Object Glasses of Refracting Telescopes. And I was reading it, and yeah, it came to me then that German telescope makers have used postage stamps to separate the objective lenses and apochromatic telescopes. So this sometimes replaced the need to use mucilage, gum on paper or tinfoil, because obviously the stamps are extremely thin and they already come pre-gummed. So yeah, I just thought this was a really unusual example of philately in astronomy, and again, looking forward to reading more about it. Okay, so I'm about halfway through. I hope you're all still there. I'm just going to talk now about assembling an astronomy and space themed collection into groupings. So you've probably already noticed that everything from astronomers to telescopes to constellations, they all appear on stamps, and I've given you a real mishmash of examples. And there isn't much point in collecting stamps if you aren't going to learn something from it. And that's why I love collecting stamps with an astronomy theme so much. And Margaret Morris, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of her, and she published a paper in 2013 called Astronomy and Philately, where she discussed the 2 subjects. And yeah, she's an amazing lady. She turned 90 this year. She's won a lot of awards for her stamp displays. And in this paper, she grouped her collection into 3 main groups. And I think this is a really useful way of organizing a philately collection within the subjects of astronomy. So I'm just going to give you a few a few of my own examples under each section to illustrate what subjects we can learn in astronomy from philately in an organized and logical way. So I'll be looking at the observers, and I'll give you some examples of astronomers on stamps and astronomical anniversaries, such as the Royal Astronomical Society on stamps. Then I'll be looking at the observables, such as our solar system on stamps and discoveries, everyone's favorite comets. I'm sure we've all seen them. And the observations, so the instruments that these guys were using to study the stars. And I've added in my own 4th heading, the explorers, because it's not something that Margaret covered in her paper, but I think that's because it comes under the other branch of philately called astrophilately. But yeah, I didn't want to leave it out because it's very important. So I'm just going to be looking at human exploration and achievements. So I'll briefly look at space race and moon landing on some stamps. Okay, so the observers. So we all know that astronomy is one of the oldest natural sciences, and this subject has been celebrated on stamps all over the world. Astronomy dates back to the 4th millennium BC. Babylonian astronomers were skilled observers and mathematicians, and they studied the sky and devoted their time to studying the planetary movements and adopted the use of the zodiacal belt. And they also recorded observations of comets and eclipses, and these studies were recorded on cuneiform clay tablets. And this stamp from Austria, issued in 1965, depicts a cuneiform clay tablet, and these tablets show a really good understanding of arithmetic, algebra, and geometry. And the Egyptians. By the 3rd millennium BC, Egyptians had already adopted a 365-day year, and annual flooding of the Nile was determined from observing the stars. This stamp there on the right depicts Hathor. It was issued in the Central African Republic in 1964. And according to ancient myths, Hathor was a sky goddess known as Lady of Stars and Sovereign of Stars, and linked to Sirius. And she was originally a personification of the Milky Way, which was considered to be the milk that flowed from the udders of a heavenly cow. And the Chinese. China has a long history of astronomy dating back to the 2nd millennium BC. And in a 2nd century tomb, a silk roll, which you can see there, it was found in that cave, which depicts comets, and it's considered to be the first atlas of comets. And the stamp on the left there, that was issued in China in 1986 and commemorates the return of Halley's Comet. And the image on the stamp echoes images that feature on the scroll. So observations of celestial bodies and scientific discoveries have shaped our way of thinking about our place in the universe. So jumping ahead now from the ancient observers to the scientists and astronomers who changed our view of our place in the universe over the last few centuries. Copernicus, he is a popular astronomer to feature on stamps. He was from Poland, and he proposed that the planets have the sun as the fixed point to which their motions are to be referred. And he's featured on a stamp here that was issued in Poland in 1942. And here he is again on a stamp issued in Hungary in 1973 to commemorate 500 years since his birth. And the stamp on the left that's joined onto it, it's a great example of a Cinderella stamp, because as you can see, it has no value. You couldn't use that to post a letter. Tycho Brahe, he was a Danish nobleman, an astronomer and writer known for his accurate and comprehensive astronomical observations. He was quite a character. In fact, he had a false nose made of brass, which has been cut off or had been cut off during a sword fight. And he formed his own system, the Tychonic system, and his system correctly saw the moon as orbiting Earth and the planets as orbiting the sun, but erroneously considered the sun to be orbiting the Earth. Johann Kepler, he was Tycho's assistant. Kepler was a convinced Copernican, and he considered Tycho's model to be mistaken. And he is also, of course, famous for his laws of planetary motion, and he was commemorated on a stamp in the Czech Republic in 2009. And the father of astronomy, Galileo, he was an astronomer, an engineer, and physicist, and he is famous for his use of the telescope and making celestial observations. And he observed the phases of Venus and the 4 largest satellites of Jupiter. And whilst he wasn't the first person to observe the moon, he made topographical charts estimating the heights of the mountains, and he featured on a stamp there issued in Ascension in 1971. And Sir Isaac Newton, he's recognized as one of the greatest mathematicians and scientists of all time. He was born in England, and he formulated the laws of motion and made seminal contributions to optics. And he was celebrated on a postage stamp in 1987 in Grenada, and he's illustrated holding the apple that was said to give him his inspiration to formulate the theory of gravity. Okay, so to continue with the observers. The Royal Astronomical Society, you've seen this stamp before, the pink stamp that was issued to celebrate the 150th anniversary. The society was formed on January 12th, 1820 at a tavern in London, and the society has now grown to 4,000 members and is one of the most eminent societies in the world promoting astronomy and geophysics. And February last year, the Royal Mail issued a set of stamps to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the RAS. So this issue, called Visions of the Universe, has 8 stamps in total, and it illustrates astronomical phenomena. So we've got 67P, the Cat's Eye Nebula, pulsars, Jupiter's auroras, the galaxy Cygnus, gravitational lensing, and each stamp includes one line of text that describes phenomena which has been discovered or investigated by British astronomers and astrophysicists. So for example, on the left-hand side in the middle, the first class black hole stamp displays the text, "Black holes are superdense regions of space." And this is a nod to the English natural philosopher John Mitchell, who first suggested their existence in 1783, and the late famous British professor and theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, who made predictions about their behavior. And these stamps were illustrated by a guy in London called Robert Ball. They're really colorful in hues of blue and red, and they bring to life this, these amazing phenomena in a way that photographs certainly could not. And in particular, just to go back to the black hole stamp, it's actually based on the work of a guy called Dr. Unzi of University College London, and he was part of the Event Horizon telescope team that captured the groundbreaking first image of black hole in 2019. And Unzi shared his computer models of his work on black holes with Robert Ball to inform the design. Okay, so just wanted to quickly draw your attention to this. So this is the Visions of the Universe stamps on a special first day cover with a photograph of Stephen Hawking and a special commemorative 50p coin which was minted in 2019 as part of the Royal Mint's Innovators in Science series, and it celebrates Hawking's life. And for this issue, special hand stamps were produced, including the original logo of the Royal Astronomical Society, which is there on the bottom left. So you can see Herschel's 40-foot telescope, and above it there you have another lovely hand stamp or postmark illustrating a black hole. So the observables, what have the observers been looking at? So our solar system, it's home to the sun, 8 planets and fascinating astronomical objects, including comets, asteroids, dwarf planets such as Pluto. And on the 16th of October 2012, the Royal Mail celebrated the 50th anniversary of the first British satellite, Ariel 1, and images of our incredible solar system featured on 6 detailed stamps using imagery taken from various probes. Colour and imagination were brought to life, giving us armchair astronomers a close-up view of these mysterious worlds. And each image has a relationship with the UK's involvement in astronomy. So the sun, it's at the centre of our solar system, around which the planets and other astronomical bodies revolve. And yeah, it featured here on a first-class stamp. So the fiery orange image of the sun was photographed by the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, which was a joint project between the European Space Agency and NASA. And the spacecraft continues to make observations of the sun's chromosphere, atmosphere and corona, despite it only being a 2-year mission. And planets featuring on the stamp set include Venus and Mars. They are Earth's nearest neighbours, and the images chosen on the first class and 77p stamps are examples of just how beautiful they are. So the exploration of Venus and Mars have strong UK connections. The Venus Express mission was proposed by scientists at Oxford University, and the image taken by ESA's Mars Express probe was the first European mission to Mars, with the UK having involvement in 3 of the 6 onboard instruments. And Earth featured on its own stamp in 1984, when the Royal Mail commemorated the 100-year anniversary of the adoption of the Greenwich Meridian, the world's prime meridian, and the image chosen on the 16-pence stamp is that of Earth as seen from Apollo 11, with a curved red line of 0 longitude superimposed on top. I'm sure many of us will remember the total solar eclipse in 1999, probably because it was quite cloudy. But 7 stamps were issued in that year by the Guernsey Post Office to commemorate the eclipse. And these are a fantastic set, taking the collector through 5 stages of the eclipse, including the first and second contact. We've got totality, including Bailey's beads, and the diamond ring effect. So again, 6 stamps hold a value, but you can see the stamp there on the end on the right-hand side. Another great example of a Cinderella stamp because it doesn't hold a value, and I'm not sure why that was. So comets. Comets have been the cause of fascination and fear for centuries, originating from the cold, darker outer reaches of the solar system. Comets are composed of ice and rock. We have a lovely miniature sheet here that was issued in India in 2018 that you can see there on the top right, and you can see the illustration of some comets there. So comets originate from 2 locations. You've got the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud. Comets originating from the Kuiper Belt are short period comets and can orbit the sun in less than 200 years, whereas comets originating from the Oort cloud take much longer to orbit the sun, often thousands of years, and are known as long period comets. There's some beautiful comet stamps out there. I love this design. This was issued in Finland in 2014 as part of the Signs in the Sky issue. And we have some lovely comet stamps here that were issued, excuse me, in the Congo in 1986. On the left, we have Comet Ikea Seki, which was seen in 1965, and Comet Wester, which was seen in 1976. Halley's Comet is named after the famous astronomer Edmund Halley. Halley's Comet is perhaps the most famous short period comet in our history due to its return period of 76 years. And some of us may even see it twice in our lifetime. I was 5 when it was here last, so I don't remember seeing that, unfortunately, and I hope to see it in the future if I'm around that long. And the comet has been recorded as far back as 240 BC in China, and it was embroidered onto the world famous Bayeux tapestry. And the souvenir stamp sheet, which you can see, was issued in Bolivia in 1986, and it features scene 32 from the Bayeux tapestry, and the comet can clearly be seen there on the upper border. And the appearance of Halley's Comet in 1986 was celebrated globally on stamps and here in the UK, and the Royal Mail issued a fantastic set of 4 stamps in 1986, which were illustrated by the famous cartoonist Ralph Steadman. And the stamps are very colourful, they're imaginative. So on the bottom right there, you can see the 17 pen stamp depicts a rather disgruntled, bit comical looking Halley. And on to the left, we have an image of the two comets, or two comets, representing seeing it twice in a lifetime. On the top right, we have Giotto, the spacecraft. And on the left then, we have the comet orbiting the sun. And a set of first day covers that I really enjoy collecting are those that were issued by the Presentation Philatelic Services in London from what I think was 1984 to 1995. And within each cover, there is a card inlay, which explains that each issue or each cover depicts a fine art painting or other collectible auctioned by Sotheby's of London. So here we have the silk cachet on the left-hand side. So you can see also on the cover, we have the 4 Halley's Comet stamps. So the cachet is an image of a portable refracting telescope manufactured by Peter Dolland, and he was a well-known maker of optical instruments. And the telescope was actually sold at Sotheby's at auction in 1985 for £22,000. And Hale-Bopp and Neowise. So it's 26 years this year that Hale-Bopp was discovered. It moved across our skies for approximately 18 months, and it was one of the most observed comets of the 20th century. It was discovered independently by Alan Hale and Thomas Bopp in the US on the 23rd of July 1995, and the comet passed perihelion on the 1st of April 1997. And as far as I'm aware, there are very few stamps that were issued to commemorate this exciting event, but on the 1st of April 1997, the Dominican Republic issued a set of stamps depicting the comet positioned against a tropical pink and yellow sky. There's 2 tails of gas and dust clearly illustrated. And in my collection, I have this lovely custom cover commemorating the event. And a custom cover is just basically someone who makes their own covers. You could go away and make your own cover tonight. You could grab a blank envelope and draw anything you wanted on it. Excuse me. And send it off and have it postmarked. So it was sent to me by a former NASA employee who specializes in making his own covers. The cover is postmarked at Cloudcroft, New Mexico on the 24th of March, 1997, which was 2 days after the comet made its closest approach to Earth. And Cloudcroft is the location where Alan Hale first made the discovery, and the image on the cover illustrates the position of the comet in the night sky from the date of its discovery to the date it was last observed in the southern hemisphere. So again, the stamp isn't of interest on this cover, it's purely the postmark. And Neowise, that would not have passed you by. Last year, it was first discovered on March 27th, 2020 by the Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, and the comet's closest approach to Earth was on the 23rd of July last year, and the comet could easily be seen with the naked eye, even in urban areas, and it is now known as one of the brightest comets since the appearance of Hale-Bopp in 1997. And Sark in Guernsey, it's a designated dark sky island, and in 2011, it was designated a dark sky island in 2011, and the 10-year anniversary was celebrated this year, and a set of 6 stamps were issued in June commemorating the anniversary and included this lovely stamp featuring a photograph of Neowise. So the observations, the tools of the observers, how were people observing? So for thousands of years, our ancestors looked to the sky, they observed and named the stars and constellations after animals, objects, and mythological characters. And they would worship the solstices and watch the planets traversing across the sky. And all of these early attempts at recording and understanding the sky have been found on the design of stamps. So the prehistoric monument of Stonehenge in Wiltshire, it's long been studied for its possible connections with ancient astronomy. The site is aligned in the direction of the sunrise of the summer solstice and the sunset of the winter solstice. And archaeoastronomers have made a range of further claims about the site's connection to astronomy, its meaning and its use. And it has appeared twice on stamps issued in the UK, once in 1990, celebrating the subject of astronomy, which is the stamp there on the left. And you can see on the bottom left corner, we have an illustration of a gyroscope. On the right-hand side, we have an image of a ship navigating by the stars. You've got Stonehenge in the middle, and just arcing above those images then, we have a lovely illustration of the phases of the moon. And again, and it appeared again on a stamp issued in 2005, which was celebrating World Heritage Sites. And the Nebra sky disk, this is a bronze disk, it's blue and gold in color, and it was found in Germany in 1999 by metal detectorists. I'm sure you've seen on the news that it's coming to London next year, I think between, is it February and July? It's going to be able to view, you can go and view it in the British Museum. So the symbols on the disc are interpreted generally as the sun or full moon, a lunar crescent, and stars, including a cluster of 7 stars interpreted as the Pleiades. You've got 2 golden arcs along the sides interpreted to mark the angle between the solstices, and they may have been added later. And a final addition, the arc at the bottom, surrounded with multiple strokes of uncertain meaning, variously interpreted as a solar barge with numerous oars, or it could be the Milky Way, or maybe even a rainbow. So archaeologists place its origins in the 1st millennium BCE, and the disc may have been an astronomical instrument, and it featured on a postage stamp in Germany in 2008, celebrating German archaeology. So other astronomical instruments that have been attributed to watching and recording our skies include the astrolabe, the armillary sphere, but perhaps the most important of all is the telescope. And we have a telescope there that featured on the stamp, issued in Sierra Leone, commemorating the 450th anniversary of Copernicus's death. So observatories, so telescopes are often housed in observatories, and in 1921, the first stamp depicting an observatory was issued in central Lithuania, produced in 2 forms, which you can see there on the top left. You've got a perforate stamp and an imperforate stamp, and the image on the stamps displays the Poxabat Observatory, named after the astronomer Marcin Poxabat, famous for his observational work and for computing the orbit of Mars. And the astronomy theme continued. In 1948, the United States printed their first astronomy themed 3-cent stamp with an image of the Palomar Mountain Observatory, and the stamp was issued to commemorate the observatory's opening. The observatory houses the Hale telescope, a 200-inch telescope named after George Hale, a famous American solar astronomer, well known for his work on the discovery of magnetic fields and sunspots. And the reflecting telescope was the largest at the time and launched new developments in telescope design, including its mount and mirror. So the last section now, the explorers. So from July 1957 to December 1958, scientists from 67 countries participated in various earth science projects as part of the International Geophysical Year. And to mark the occasion, the United States Post Office issued a stamp featuring a striking illustration of the sun, which was in the most active phase of its 11-year cycle, solar cycle 19, which was the 19th solar cycle since 1755. And also depicted is a section of Michelangelo's famous Sistine Chapel painting, The Creation of Adam, which is a nod to our natural curiosity and desire to understand our place in the universe. And the International Geophysical Year came at a time when the Soviet Union and the United States were locked in a heated race to be the first nation to go to space. And the Soviet Union succeeded on the 4th of October 1957, when Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite, was launched into low Earth orbit. And the satellite survived just under 3 months in space before falling back to Earth and burning up in our atmosphere. And the Soviet Union issued its first Sputnik stamp on the 4th of November 1957, which you can see there. The 40 kopeck perforated stamp. It's a simple design, it's blue and grey in colour, and as you can see, it's illustrating the satellite orbiting the Earth. And the launch of Sputnik has been celebrated globally on stamps, including Romania, Cuba, and Korea. And after the successful launch of Laika, the space dog, there she is, aboard Sputnik 2 on the 3rd of November 1957. A further triumph came for the Soviet Union on the 12th of April 1961, when Yuri Gagarin was launched aboard Vostok 1 and orbited the Earth for 108 minutes before he returned to Earth. And Gagarin was the first man in space. Excuse me, I have a drink. He was the first man in space and the first man to orbit the Earth. And not one to shy away from celebrating their achievements through Philately. A plethora of stamps from the Soviet Union commemorating this momentous event exists, including this rather wonderful 10 kopeck stamp, a great example of Soviet space propaganda, illustrating Gagarin looking to the stars as Vostok 1 shoots off into the sky above a silhouetted skyline, and you can see the date of the launch there in the rocket's wake. So whilst the Soviet Union blazed the trail into space, the USA were very successful in their own first, and on the 20th of July 1969, the crew of Apollo 11 were the first to land on the moon in the lunar module, the Eagle. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the moon on the 21st of July, And needless to say, there was an explosion in the issue of stamps and memorabilia celebrating this milestone. So this single 10-cent stamp that you can see there was issued in September 1969, was designed by a guy called Paul Calais, and it was issued to celebrate mankind's historic visit to the moon. And it illustrates Neil Armstrong setting foot on the moon, embarking from Eagle, the lunar lander, and the engraving plates for the postage stamp were actually carried to the surface of the moon by the Apollo 11 astronauts, and it now resides in the National Postal Museum in Washington. So who is Paul Calais, you might be wondering? Well, he was actually one of the first 8 artists chosen by NASA in 1962 to document the American space program's Project Mercury. He's had an amazing space art career spanning more than 40 years. He's covered Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and space shuttle missions, and he was the only artist present with the Apollo 11 crew on the morning of July 16, 1969, as he prepared for the historic launch to the moon. So if you put his name in Google, him and his son, there is an amazing website there with some of their artwork. And yeah, in 1989, for the 20th anniversary of the moon landing, the Postal Service asked Paul's son, Chris, to design the $2.40 priority mail stamp, which you can see there. And they asked Paul to design a first day cover, the cachet, which is the illustration on the left-hand side of the envelope, which you can see. And I'm very lucky to have a cover signed by both of them in my collection. And in 1994, for the 25th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing, Paul and Chris jointly designed 2 US stamps commemorating the event. So you have a 29-cent commemorative stamp and a $9.95 express mail stamp. So just the last few slides now. So the past couple of years have been no exception to the issue of Apollo 11 stamps. To commemorate the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, the United States Postal Service issued 2 vertical forever stamps on the 20th of July, 2019. Simple design. The images depict the iconic photograph of Buzz Aldrin taken by Neil Armstrong. And on the right there, you have the Apollo 11 landing site, the Sea of Tranquility, which is marked with a dot. And the Isle of Man Post Office, they've really kept the Apollo theme going. In 2019, they issued some beautiful stamps. They released a set of 8 fantastic stamps to commemorate the 50th anniversary. And this one small step set explores 50 years of lunar exploration, and it tells a story of the first 12 Apollo missions. And they depict famous images, including mission control at NASA, which you can see the second stamp in there on the top row. And we have the famous photograph Earthrise on the end there on the top row. And that was a photograph taken by William Anders during the Apollo 8 mission. And on the bottom row, you can see there that there's the first footprints on the moon. I just really love the detail of these stamps. So around the perforations are famous quotes from people involved in the missions, including President Kennedy and the astronauts from each mission. So each stamp features the map coordinates of a place relating to the theme of each stamp. So for example, this Project Apollo stamp that you can see, it displays the coordinates of the Rice Stadium where Kennedy delivered his speech announcing the Apollo program in 1962. So you can see the coordinates there on the left-hand vertical, and on the right there, on the bottom, sorry, on the right-hand vertical, you can read Kennedy's famous quote, "We choose to go to moon in this decade." Okay, so the future of Philately, just quickly, we've seen that celebration and commemoration of astronomical achievements, technological advancements, discoveries. They have produced an endless amount of stamps, covers, and postmarks. We have some fantastic events to look forward to. So we've got Perseverance, that's already on Mars. Hopefully we'll have the launch of James Webb Telescope. And we've got ESA's Solar Orbiter, which is already up there. I think it makes its closest approach or falls into its orbit around the sun in November. So it's a really exciting time for Philately. I aim to promote and teach it as much as I can. There's just some great examples here of recent postmarks that have been issued. And yeah, how to get started might sound silly, but just research on the internet, look at auction websites such as eBay. There's one called Delcamp and another one called Colnect. So whatever you fancy astronomy wise, if you were to type in Sputnik, for example, Sputnik stamps, you could type those into those websites and you will be spoiled for choice. There are a few astronomy stamp societies out there. So we have the Astrospace Stamp Society, which I am a member of, and I think it's about 60 members of us around the world. And yeah, they've got the American Philatelic Society, the American Topical Association, and local philatelic societies as well. I've given a few talks to guys in the UK. And books. There are some fantastic books out there. So The Race to the Moon by Umberto Cavallaro and Stumping Through Astronomy by Renato Ducati, fantastic resources. And yeah, you've got the Stanley Gibbons catalogues. Go to the shops, get some magazines. You can go to W.H. Smith, Tesco's. Yeah, they all stock some philatelic magazines. So get stuck in. So thank you so much. You can contact me if you want. There's my email address. I'm on Twitter and obviously on Facebook. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Really interesting.
Yeah,
Thank
it was
you.
really, yeah, it was really good.
Aye.
I got out my old stamp album.
Oh, cool.
I haven't looked at it since I was probably about a teenager. But I found
Oh, there you
from
go.
Poland.
Oh,
There's one-
yeah.
It's
I like the
got
butterfly ones.
Gemini,
They're lovely.
in America, and then I've got some from Czechoslovakia as well in it. So yeah,
Fantastic. You'll be looking through that tonight then.
and it's still in quite good condition. So thank you. I've not looked through it for years.
I do like that at the end of my talks, the number of people that have run off during my talk to grab their
Yeah.
stamp albums to show at the end. And they're like, I haven't looked at this for so long, but I'm going to start back
Alright.
up again.
Yeah, I've kept
got a
a good
couple of comments.
suitcase, so yeah, great.
I've got a couple of comments. First of all, I saw a stamp of Hale Bopp by Linda Davidson in Cumbria, and also Stuart Atkinson,
Oh, there
Who-
were photographs, not stamps. Yeah.
who came as a junior to our astronomy club, Border Astronomical in Carlisle. And in 1997, Linda, who was in Cockermouth Society, and I put together a book using her pictures and my pictures
Oh,
here
cool.
over Cumbria.
Oh, yeah.
Just a couple of pounds, and I publish local books, so I still sell it occasionally
Okay.
when we go to astronomy events.
Yeah.
Linda's pictures are in there, and there's some brilliant ones. That one is one of mine, Colbeck Quarry, over Colbeck Quarry. And these were done, though, this is before the age of go-to telescopes.
Yeah.
These were done with a Scotch mount.
Mm.
And now a Scotch mount. So they're exposures of, well, I use 50 ASA film slides, and exposures of up to 15 minutes using a
Well-
Scotch mount driven by stepper motors. We used to
No,
drive.
and I was going to say that they didn't have digital cameras then in the 90s either. So, it's pretty impressive that people were taking photographs of comets without digital photography, because who knows, when they got produced, they might have been a load of rubbish. So, yeah. No, it's funny. I contacted Linda because I interviewed Alan Hale a couple of years ago for the Sky at Night magazine. And yeah, I needed a picture of Hale Bopp. So actually, it was Stuart Atkinson that put me in touch with her.
That's right, you would, yeah. And
Yeah.
Stuart,
Oh, there you go.
Stuart produces very good children's books on astronomy.
Yes, he's a good friend of mine. He's helped me a lot in my writing and stuff. So I've never actually met him though.
Well, as a 12-year-old, he came to us with his mother from Cockermouth to our society every Thursday evening.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
the-
no, he's lovely.
Astronomy, and it all came from there.
Excellent. I'll tell him that you were talking about him.
I speak to him regularly. In fact, he comes and gives us talks. And he
Yes.
goes regularly to the Sky Fest, where we missed 2 years now, across at Scarborough.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's good.
Yeah, no, he's a very talented astronomer. He knows his stuff.
He does.
He can thank you for that, obviously.
Oh, no, it's a long time ago.
Any questions for Katrin?
I'm just impressed by the artworks of the stamps. I'm an arty person myself, so
Okay.
it's just the variety of styles, and I noticed that not every artist or designer gets mentioned on the stamp. It's quite rare that you see, a dedication or their name on the stamps,
Yes,
which is a
that's
shame.
right. So normally I don't think they do put the names of the designers on the stamp, but obviously when the stamps are issued, they have a big, in America especially, they have these amazing ceremonies where, so for example, if they were going to issue a new set of Apollo stamps, they might have it at the Kennedy Space Center or something, and they'll make a whole day of it. They'll have speakers, they'll have music. But yeah, in the UK that they don't have anything like that. So if you wanted to go away and research who illustrated the stamp, it might be in that presentation pack that I showed at the beginning, or usually in that envelope there will be like a cardboard inlay which you can read all about it. But yeah, there's nothing on the stamps to say who actually illustrated them, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You'll have to design some of your own now.
Well, I don't know. I do abstract paintings. I'm not into realism, so
Okay.
I don't know what I would make of a comet or a planet. It would be weird.
Well, you never know. You've got to give it a go.
Yeah.
Could I just Google on eBay, just to see some of the stamps on there and that, to see what sort of prices they were ranging from for even the Einstein ones, ones with Einstein on it. And some of them were about £18 odds.
So you can, I think they're still selling, if you go on the Isle of Man website, you can still get some of the general relativity stamps on there, which will probably be cheaper than eBay.
But
that is the joy of stamp collecting, because even if you just type in astronomy stamps on eBay, you can grab some for £2 and stuff. So yeah, it's up to you really how much you want to spend, and I think that's the good thing about it. You don't have to spend a fortune. A bit like being an astronomer, you don't have to have a £3,000 telescope. You can just walk outside with a pair of binoculars and enjoy the night sky. So
true.
Yeah.
I was impressed by the Einstein ones, because I'm a big fan of Einstein. You see some.
Okay.
Always get tongue out. Oh.
Yeah, famous for
I hate
photographs.
tongues.
I love that one, Einstein. And my niece, when she was young, at the it must have been at the Kelvin Grove Museum.
Oh, cool! I like that. Action figure, I love it.
The action figure, because she knew how much
That's great,
I liked Einstein, and it tells you on the back all about Einstein and that as well, and I've got quite a few books to do with Einstein and that, but the stamps on your images and that, they were really beautiful.
They're amazing, aren't they? Yeah. And like I said, you can just learn so much from them as well. And yeah, it's incredible, the scope. And some, you could just focus on Albert Einstein on stamps if you wanted to.
Because I've seen that. Yeah.
There's a few out there with him on there.
Some quite beautiful stamps from countries that you wouldn't expect would be interested, Sierra Leone and countries like that. I mean, Brazil's a huge country, but the smaller countries, you just wouldn't think that they would bother.
No, I know
what I mean.
I agree. I mean, when you look at them, like there's stamps issued in Kazakhstan that celebrate the Apollo missions and stuff, and there's literally thousands and thousands of stamps out there. But yeah, you're right. When I've been looking at stuff, I'm like, gosh, well, why are they celebrating that? Or
exactly.
But that's the really interesting thing about stamp collecting. You learn about loads of different countries as well, and yeah. But yeah, no, you're right. There's a lot of obscure countries there.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Doesn't it look as if there no other questions? I think everybody's just taking in the actual talk and all the images that were presented and that, I think it's just been sort of overwhelming, the beauty of these things,
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad that you thought I'd used good images to illustrate.
Yeah.
Because it was very interesting, so I'd like to thank Katrin so much for this, excellent and interesting talk with so many beautiful stamps. You know, you realise how many stamps there are out there, you know, and I've seen quite a few, and I have got some in my bedroom somewhere, some of the packs, stamps and that. And my friend, he collected stamps years ago, and he had a book and that, and he showed me them and that, and you know, and all the different countries, just what you were saying, Fiona, all the different countries and everything. You know, I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people just assume it's a hobby for old men, and I was guilty of that. You know, my dad has been collecting stamps for a very long time. I'd be, oh, Dad, stamps are so boring. What are you doing? And then it wasn't until about 6 years ago when I was back at home, he had like an album out on the table, and I was like, oh, I was like, actually, these are really cool. And that's where my interest started then. So yeah, stamps aren't boring.
Well, the ones certainly weren't that you had up tonight. You know, they were really interesting.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me as well. I really appreciate it.
Aye. So I would like
to meet you all.
Aye. So I would like us to. Pardon?
I said it was really interesting, and yeah, made me get my album out.
Because it made you go and look your stamp album out. I haven't
collected stamps since I was a teenager.
There you go. You'll start collecting again and spending all your money on stamps.
I did a prize and I won 3 stamps from the Yemen.
Yeah.
At school, yeah. Brilliant. Very interesting.
Thank you.
So I would like us to thank Katrin in the usual CAS way.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I mean, it was really good. I mean,